I'll say this now, I've never played through a Souls board game fully until this one. I tried about an hour of Bloodborne but didn't really care for it. Them being known as a difficult series wasn't the issue. It was rather the combat seemed kinda basic, and the whole idea of having to walk back to an encounter or boss every time you die sounded miserable to play through. But here we are. Elden Ring has graced me and many others the joy of playing through a masterpiece. Initially, I wasn't going to pick it up because I thought it was just another Souls game, and even though I was following the hype cycle for the game, my feelings never really changed about it. Then, the public got their hands on it, and it's definitely been a while since the game has been this well received by so many people. I got caught up in the hype and ended up purchasing the game knowing damn well I was going to die a lot. I won't lie, it was a struggle for the first 30 hours or so, constant complaining and wondering what the hell the devs were thinking when making certain areas and bosses.
Did he just do a... What the fuck was that? What the fuck is that?
Me being incredibly stubborn for some segments didn't really help either. There eventually became a moment where things just clicked, or maybe it was when I decided to actually make a proper build and not just randomly assign my stats. I wasn't dying as much, I was punishing enemies more consistently. I was starting to understand how this game is supposed to be played. See, I come from a fan of character action games, you know, fast-paced games with crazy combos and movement options which tend to be on the more easier side of things, at least on a normal difficulty. Those games let you make mistakes and don't punish you that hard for it, but here in Elden Ring, the world is cruel and can be unrelenting in how it punishes the player for approaching a situation poorly, or just plain mean. It's going to be a hump you're going to have to get over to enjoy the game proper. If I had any major criticism about the game, it would be that it's not an easy game to jump right into, but it works both ways. Presenting the player with such a daunting task when it comes to conquering this massive world can be intimidating, but the satisfaction when you do it is 100% worth it. So what makes Elden Ring a massive success? Why is it so loved by just about everyone? Let's dive into FromSoft's latest work and see just how they achieved making a game of this caliber. Usually, I would talk about something like the gameplay or story first, but after playing through the game once and thinking about my playthrough, the things that come to mind first are some of the locations I visited during my journey. Whether it's the Crystal Lake swamps of Lemuria or the hellscape that is Caelid, there was always something visually impressive to gaze at during my travels, each location having a distinct feel to it using a wide variety of colors to convey a certain vibe to them. While the graphics might not be as detailed as something like Horizon, the game more than makes up for it with its architecture and the grandness of some of its areas. But what makes the settings really stand out and makes them memorable is how they are designed. Stormvale Castle being one of the first major set pieces players visit, it gives them an idea of what to expect from the rest of the game. When people say the game is massive, they're talking about the density of the areas you visit, not so much the space it takes up. Places like Stormvale and Landal Castle appear on the map as relatively small areas, but once inside become these sprawling dungeons filled with secrets and many foes to pass through before completing. The goal is usually approaching such areas from the outside, climbing in from standalone towers, or using special keys to enter. Going from building to building, clearing out enemies along the way while collecting various resources to prepare you for the challenge that awaits at the end. Again, this type of level design covers some of the major dungeons that the player will explore, some a bit more open than others. For example, Volcano Manor was what I thought to be just that, a manor where some lovely people live. Upon revisiting the area, I discovered there's a whole new area behind it. This is the thing I would like to highlight the most about the way FromSoft handles level design. It rewards the player for exploring thoroughly and gives the option to conquer said area however they choose. This being a perfect segue into the soul of these games, the combat. I talked earlier about how Souls games combat didn't have the fast-paced, combo-intensive action I was looking for, and for the first 30 hours or so of Elden Ring, I was wondering what people saw in such a basic combat system. Then something clicked, or rather I got a weapon I was happy with and a build that supported said weapon. Figured out that magic can be pretty useful, summons can be great to either gain a solid head start against a tough boss or help with finishing them off. It took a bit of time, but I was finally starting to figure out a way to play the game without dying all the time. Apparently, there's a sort of divide within the Souls community regarding the various methods to combat foes. This is the vocal minority speaking, so it's really not that important, but I feel it's worth mentioning. The game gives the player many tools, some being better than others. If I want to use summons to win fights, then I'll do it. Or use Calm and Azure. Or use Moonveil. Or whatever overpowered item I get. As far as I'm concerned, that's my reward for struggling for the first 30 hours of the game. I was able to defeat strong foes and traverse dangerous areas, so I should be rewarded with abilities that make my journey a little easier. If someone wants to grind out fights being almost naked and using a dagger with no points put into vigor, that's fine, just leave everyone else alone. Some of these bosses seem like a gigantic pain to fight melee only, and I don't want to deal with them like that. The game rewards me for approaching certain bosses with the right build and gear by making the fight easier, so I see nothing wrong with how I play the game. Now that that little rant is over, we'll be shifting to what gives the combat more depth than I gave it credit for: the enemies you encounter. With a wide variety of all sorts of different creatures waiting to send you back to a loading screen, it is of the utmost importance that you figure out how to deal with every enemy to make the time journeying through the world an enjoyable one. From rabid dogs to flying birds with explosives, there is no shortage of foes whose mere presence is enough to intimidate. But at the same time, there are plenty of enemies who don't even look like they would attack, but then they'll start doing shit like this, or this, which always got me shook when they would do something surprising like that. And then there's just a bunch of dudes with the Burger King mascot hat on. I don't know if one of the devs saw those older Burger King commercials and thought there should be an enemy type who wears that mask, but it's made for some good memes, so I won't complain. Point is, while there are some reskins of certain enemies, the amount of them is quite impressive, and up until the end, they never once made it easy for me. Same can be said about the bosses. These guys are no joke and present a worthwhile challenge to overcome. A lot of the Souls fanbase would say that a majority of fights in this series are hard but fair, and that can be applied to Elden Ring as well. Without going too much into the fights themselves, the mid-boss and final boss of the first area, Stormvale, serve as a gateway of sorts on what the player must improve on in order to surpass even greater challenges. From reading movement and attack patterns to knowing how many hits you can get in before you back off, it's all about playing in a way that directly counters their attack style. But again, things like summons and magic exist, so you know it's going to be a different experience for everyone. This is something of a side note. It's something I noticed right away after I started playing. The bosses look like they're having a blast, just using all their crazy moves, and you, the player, having no way to deal with them until it's over. Sure, you can gain some of their abilities after defeating them, but I think it would be fun if some random DLC down the road, you're given the chance to play through the game as one of the bosses. I want to be a fat noble that can roll around for way too long, or riding around as Radahn on my tiny horse. Kind of a silly idea, but FromSoft did such a great job with a lot of these designs that it's kind of a shame they're a one and done deal. I'm really only scratching the surface with boss encounters, mainly because I think they're far better enjoyed with going in blind rather than looking up a guide or video prior to doing, just so you don't die as much. It can be a struggle constantly dying to the same enemy over and over again, but once you master their patterns and defeat them, you're not only rewarded with something in-game, but also an immense feeling of satisfaction. Or you can do this. This is satisfying in a different way, but still feels good all the same. The story, or what I call the content creator's dream of a story in this game, is actually pretty great despite the name I just gave it. I see lore videos being made about this game for years to come, whether it be based on in-game lore or just theories that have been made based on what people know now. There are so many things to dig into regarding the world, the characters, and the various powers at play. Not sure how much George R.R. Martin had a hand in this, but the game does a great job in letting players imagine and theorize how certain events transpired. The main quest gives a general idea on what is going on and what the player should be doing, but the real juicy bits of lore come from some of the side quests. Ranni's in particular is definitely a standout, leading you to some of the best boss fights in the game and learning details of what happened to her. It gives insights on what it was like to be a member of a royal family of gods, and hearing her story of defying her fate was fascinating to me. Also, she has 4 arms. There was plenty of NPCs whose story I did not get to see due to me either missing them or possibly killing them by accident.
However, you are maidenless.
Which sure, can be counted as bad quest design if I just don't even know of an NPC's existence, but I would argue that lends itself into its already great replay value. There are so many builds to try, so going through the game again with new content still to be found can only be seen as a positive in my eyes. Moving on to the final aspect I'd like to touch on, and one that enhances the experience of battles: the music. As much as the word epic has been used to describe anything, I can't really think of another word that describes what plays during boss encounters. Majority of the time while exploring the world, there really isn't much to listen to, just the sounds of nature or Torrent's hoofs galloping through landscapes, not unlike Breath of the Wild. So it makes for a striking contrast which makes the boss themes stand out even more than usual. Grand orchestral instruments with a strong chorus backing them, adding tension to an already intense battle. The Godskin duo fight, being arguably one of the worst fights in the game, also has one of the best tracks in the game, which in a weird way balances it out so I can't bring myself to hate it. This brings us to the end of this overview. Beating this game reminds me of the feeling I had when I first beat Hades, the one where I know that I'll be eagerly waiting to see what the developers can put out next to top their previous work. For Elden Ring, it's tough to say considering going open world seems like the last change you can really do without changing the core of what a Souls game is. At the same time, releasing an open world game that manages to garner so much praise and financial success when the genre is quite stale at this point is nothing to scoff at. I give Elden Ring a 10 out of 10, creating a new standard for the genre without giving in to modern accessibility, making it something both fans and newcomers can enjoy. Thank you for listening.